and here at the Charm of It, I provide relaxed reviews celebrating the lighter side of board games. Today, I am reviewing one of my very favorite games, The Fox in the Forest, which is a two-player game designed by Joshua Burgle and published by Renegade Game Studios. This is one of my very favorite games, as I said, and it's also one of the games that I've played the most. So, today I'm going to tell you what makes it so much fun. One of the things I find most fun about The Fox in the Forest is how interactive it is. You and your opponent are each trying to use your hand of cards in order to win the best strategy possible, which means you have to try to figure out what your opponent is thinking, what cards they have to play, and then best them. So there's a lot of time spent staring at your opponent. There's always a little bit of banter when you're playing cards, and it's just a lot of eye contact, and you really feel like you're there with the other person. Now, because only one of you can take each trick, there is a little bit of cutthroat competition, just in the sense that each of those tricks is a winner-takes-all situation. However, I don't find this a mean game at all, because there are so many mechanics built into it that balance that out, and each trick is such a small part of the total game that it never feels as if you've stomped on your opponent or as if they've stomped on you. Of course, in a game like this, where you're going head-to-head with one other player, it's really important that it be well-balanced, and The Fox in the Forest certainly is. First of all, there are multiple ways to score points, and so every round, each player is going to get at least a few points. Some might get more than others, but you're never going to feel like it's a winner-takes-all situation where you're with 0 and the other person has just amassed this giant number of points. Instead, you're slowly accumulating points to try to hit 21. Because there are 4 to 6 rounds in an average game, that really helps mitigate the luck that is inherent in any kind of card game where you're being dealt a hand. And also, because each of the odd cards has powers, that means that there are enough special power cards in the deck that you're going to have at least a few in every hand. So while there are certainly easier hands to play than others, between those two factors, I find that you and your opponent never feel like one of you got incredibly lucky while the other one was unlucky. Instead, it's just one hand might be slightly better than another. So in general, I find that you're not going to feel like you lost the game because you didn't get the cards that you needed. Instead, it's just different cards require different strategies. And because there are multiple ways to score points, you're always going to have an avenue open to you. You're never going to feel as if you're just stuck with a terrible hand and there's no point in trying to figure out how to play it because you can't possibly win, which would not be fun. I really love the pacing in The Fox in the Forest as well. First of all, because both you and your opponent are playing a card every round, there's very little downtime. You're both deciding which card to play at almost the same time, and you don't have to sit through an entire turn that your opponent is taking without you. Instead, you're both constantly playing, which is really nice. In addition, each round picks up steam towards the end. You have fewer cards to play, so it takes less time to decide which one you're going to throw down. And as both you and your opponent want to find out if your strategies work, I find that you end up playing faster and faster, and the tension also begins to build as you're both trying to figure out who's going to take the amount of tricks you want to take. And so this sense of escalation is really enjoyable. And since you get to play 4 to 6 rounds in a game, you get those peaks several times. So I find that the pacing is just excellent, and I'm always engaged and curious and want to find out what's going to happen next. The aesthetics of The Fox in the Forest are absolutely beautiful. The backs of the cards have the forest theme with this lovely green and filigree, and all of the odd number cards have individual art. One suit is themed kind of nocturnally, another is themed autumnal, and the final has this wintry theme. And I find that this really helps you feel like you're in a woodland fairy tale, and it's just really enjoyable to see the cards as you throw them down. You only ever get to see 2 cards face up at a time, but it's still really fun to play them. Several of the cards do depict humans, and the gender balance is quite good. However, most of the humans depicted are white. There are a couple people of color, but That's my only complaint about the aesthetics, is that I think that they could have done a little better as far as diversity goes. But what's nice is, for example, with the woodcutters, there is a female woodcutter as well as a male woodcutter, so they get bonus points for that. The other really good thing about the aesthetics is that it is very easy to tell the suits apart. So if you're not used to playing card games where you have to track suits, these ones make it easy for you with very different looking symbols. So even if for some reason you can't tell the colors apart that easily, you can always tell the symbols apart. And that's what the even ones look like that don't have the special artwork. The cards themselves feel really nice and are a pleasure to hold in your hands, and they shuffle really well, which is good because you're going to be shuffling quite a bit. There are only 33 cards in the deck, so the variability of this game is going to come from getting different hands as you play versus seeing new components every time that you play. However, I personally find that the way that different hands require different strategies as well as different opponents adds more than enough variability for me to be happy playing this game over and over. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's one of the games that I've played the most, and I am far from tired of it. So even though the components themselves aren't that variable, I find that there are so many different strategic options that I'm always having fun while I play this, and I never feel like I'm just having repetitive playing or in a deja vu situation. So clearly I find this a very fun game to play. And one of the reasons why I've played it so frequently is that it is also very easy to play. The setup time is minimal. All you have to do is shuffle the deck and deal 13 cards to each player. The play space required is also very small. For me, this is a couch playing game. You and your opponent can sit at opposite ends of the couch and just put your cards down in the middle. Since you're only ever laying 2 cards down at a time, you don't need to have a lot of space, and since where the cards are doesn't matter, you don't need to worry about kind of if cards start sliding or if you jostle the table. So this is also a very portable game. All you need is the deck of cards, which is quite small. And so if you wanted, you could just rubber band this. There are 2 player guides that are the same size as the rest of the deck, so you don't even have to worry about bringing the rulebook along, and throw this in any kind of pocket or purse. But even the box itself, here are the player guides that I was looking for, right there. Even the box itself is small enough to fit in all of my tote bags. The only reason why the box is larger is because it's got space for scoring tiles, but you could easily keep score with pen and paper or on your phone if you wanted to just bring out the deck. Either way, it's a very lightweight game that is easy to keep on you, so that if you're at a restaurant waiting for food or you stop for a coffee, you can just pull this out and start playing right away. Before you play for the first time, you need to know the rules, of course, and I found that the rule book is very clear. It's well laid out, and it explains first what a trick-taking game is, in case you have never played a game like euchre or pinochle or hearts before, since this is a variation on those types of games. And then it gets into the specific details of this game. And I found it quite easy to follow, although I do have a background in trick-taking. It is a little difficult at first to remember what all of the special powers are, just because there are 11 cards in each suit, and all of the odd ones have special powers. However, each odd card tells you at the bottom what it does, so you don't have to memorize them. You just have to look in your hand. And if you want to know what your opponent might be able to do, the side, so one side of the player references scoring, and the other side lists all of those special powers. So even if you don't have a card in your hand, you'll be able to see what they do. It only took a game or 2 for me to become familiar with all the special powers. And because they're written on the cards, I find that that's still a pretty low barrier as far as learning. I do think that learning an effective strategy takes a little more time, especially if you haven't played a trick-taking game before, but that's kind of a separate issue from understanding the rules. Understanding how to play the best, I think, in any game is going to take a few rounds for you to get the feel of it. The nice thing is that since you play multiple hands in this game, you get a lot of practice just in 20 to 30 minutes. And once I had played this a couple times, I didn't need to refer to the rulebook ever again. The final factor for me in how frequently a game gets played is a little bit amorphous to talk about, but it's basically how much mental effort or energy it takes. So in my mind, I divide games into weeknight games, which you can play even if you've had a full day of work and you're feeling pretty tired, and weekend games that you really need to have had good rest and be fresh and energetic and willing to dive into a complex mental puzzle. So for me, The Fox and the Forest is definitely a weekday game. Now, I will admit that having played a lot of trick-taking games in the past, I didn't have to learn that aspect of the game, but the special powers change the kinds of strategies that you would use compared to a conventional trick-taking game, so I don't think that I had a huge advantage in starting the game with that background, and I don't think it takes less mental effort for me to play at this point than it would for someone else who had never played a trick-taking game before but had also played the game the same amount of times. So with that caveat in place, first to me, a sign that a game isn't going to be a brain burner is that there's table talk, and I certainly always banter with my opponents when I'm playing this one. And that is because the only decision you're making is which card to play next. And in the beginning, you have 13 cards, so you might have a few more options. But as the round progresses, you have fewer and fewer cards, and so those decisions become easier to make, just because you have fewer options. And also, at the beginning of the game, I'm not always sure which strategy I want to pursue, but by the midpoint, it's pretty clear what I need to do, and so those decisions become almost automatic at that point. And I just find that this hits a really sweet spot between giving me enough of a puzzle that I'm engaged, but not so much that I feel exhausted or that I feel that I need to spend 5 minutes thinking through every move. Part of that, too, is that you're playing multiple rounds in a game, so even if you make a bad decision in one round, it doesn't feel as if you've thrown away the whole game. You have a lot of opportunities to come back. And I find that because of the artwork and the level of engagement that I have with the other player, I really love this game, and I don't need to win in order to feel satisfied. There still might be moments where I've played a really good card, or where something neat has happened, or there's been a surprise, and I'm as satisfied by that as I am by winning. So if you're looking for a two-player game that prioritizes interaction, doesn't have a lot of downtime in the play, is quick to set up, and requires very little table space, The Fox and the Forest is a great choice. You and the other player will be spending all of your time engaging with each other. You get to look at beautiful artwork in the midst of your play, and the game is just really cleverly designed to be interesting and provide some intriguing strategic puzzles without ever feeling too heavy or as if you need to put in a huge amount of mental energy into making any of your decisions. I find that it is very well balanced and enjoyable to play, and whether I win or lose, I always have fun. So The Fox and the Forest is one of my favorite games, and I think that it would be an excellent first choice for anyone curious about board games.